She said it so quietly, he almost missed it. 3 words, barely a breath, pressed against the wall of a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning while her blood soaked through the white of her nurse's uniform. It hurts too much. Not from the wound. Not from the bullet that had grazed her arm when she'd thrown herself between a frightened child and the chaos that had erupted in the emergency room when Leonardo Ferrara's enemies came for him. From something older. Something deeper. The kind of pain that lives in a person's chest for years before it finds words. Leonardo had been shot at, threatened, survived things that would destroy ordinary men. But standing in that corridor, watching this woman bleed and shake and refuse to cry while she checked on a child who wasn't even hers, he felt something crack open inside his chest that he had no name for. And he knew, with the absolute certainty of a man who had navigated 38 years of dangerous decisions, that his life had just divided into before and after this moment. Welcome to the Mafia Codes, besties. If you've been waiting for a story that'll reach through your screen and grab your heart and refuse to let go, tonight is your night. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs something real today, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I see every single one. Now let's go. This story is entirely fictional. All characters, names, and events are imaginary. The night it began, Chicago General Hospital was drowning. 3 car accidents on the expressway. A warehouse fire on the south side. 17 patients in a waiting room designed for 8, and a nursing staff stretched so thin that Jennifer Reyes had been on her feet for 11 hours straight without sitting down once. She'd eaten half a granola bar at 6 and forgotten about dinner entirely because the 8-year-old in Bay had needed her more than her stomach had. Jennifer was good at that. Prioritizing other people's needs over her own. Her mother used to call it a gift. Her ex-boyfriend had called it a flaw. Jennifer called it Tuesday. She was 31 years old, curvy and capable, with dark brown skin that had been glowing before the double shift had stripped the glow away, and thick natural black hair she kept pulled up at work because practicality mattered more than appearance when you were keeping people alive. She had the kind of face that made patients trust her immediately, open and warm and honest, with large dark eyes that missed very little, and a mouth that said difficult truths with enough gentleness that people could actually hear them. She was also the only nurse on the floor who'd noticed the man in Bay 7 wasn't a normal patient. He'd come in at 11:15 with a gunshot wound to his left shoulder. His men had tried to bring him in through a side entrance, which the security guard had rerouted to the ER because the hospital had rules. The men, 4 of them, all in expensive suits with a particular way of standing that Jennifer had learned to read, had not been pleased about the rerouting. The patient himself had said nothing. Just sat on the examination table while the resident on call tried not to shake and looked at the room with the flat, assessing eyes of someone who found nothing surprising and nothing threatening, because he himself was the most threatening thing in any room he entered. Name: Leonardo Ferrara. Age: 38. Occupation: listed as businessman, which made the security guard write something in a notebook and Jennifer file the information in the part of her brain she used for things that required careful handling. She'd been assigned to prep him for the attending physician. She'd done it with the same professional efficiency she brought to everything. Taken his vitals. Documented the wound. Spoken to him the way she spoke to all her patients, directly and without theater. This is going to need surgical intervention, she'd said, examining the wound with gloved hands. The bullet's still in there. I know that's not what you want to hear. It's not, he'd agreed. His voice was lower than she'd expected. Italian accented and controlled, the kind of voice that was accustomed to being the last word in conversations. You're also running a slight fever, which tells me there's already inflammation. How long ago did this happen? A pause. 4 hours. Jennifer kept her expression neutral. 4 hours. Okay. She made a note. You should have come in sooner. I was busy. With what, exactly, that was more important than a bullet in your shoulder? The question came out more pointed than she intended. The 4 suited men near the door went very still. Leonardo Ferrara looked at her with those flat, assessing eyes, and something in them shifted. Not anger. Something closer to surprise. Managing the situation that produced the bullet, he said. The situation is going to have to manage itself for the next few hours. You're in my care now. She pulled off her gloves, met his gaze steadily. And in my care, you follow my instructions.
Can you do that?
Another pause. Longer this time. And then something almost imperceptible in his expression. Not quite a smile. The ghost of what a smile might look like on a face that had forgotten how. Yes, he said. She hadn't thought much about it afterward. She'd handed him off to the attending, managed her other patients, drank the other half of her granola bar at midnight, and was doing medication rounds at 1:50 in the morning when the doors at the end of the corridor exploded inward.
2 men, armed,
moving with purpose. Jennifer registered them in the same second she registered the small boy, 8 years old, who had wandered out of Bay 4 to find the bathroom and was now standing directly in the path between the men and wherever they were going. She didn't decide to move. She was just moving. Across the corridor, in front of the child, arms out, her body between the boy and whatever was about to happen. What happened was a gunshot that she felt before she heard it, a white-hot graze along her upper arm that spun her slightly without taking her down, and then Leonardo Ferrara's security converging from both ends of the corridor, and the 2 men being subdued in a chaos of shouting and running feet, and the boy crying against Jennifer's side while she held him up and tried to assess her own injuries simultaneously. Leonardo appeared at the door of Bay 7. He'd clearly pulled his own 4 out, which was going to be a problem. He was wearing a hospital gown and looking at Jennifer with an expression she wouldn't understand for weeks. She sat down against the wall because her legs had made an executive decision about weight-bearing. The boy was against her side, hiccuping sobs into her uniform. Her arm was bleeding in the specific way that said not serious but not ignorable. And she said the 3 words that came up from somewhere deep inside her. From exhaustion and adrenaline and 11 hours on her feet and the accumulated weight of a year that had been, quietly, the hardest of her life. It hurts too much. She wasn't talking about her arm. Leonardo heard it. She knew he heard it because she saw the moment the words landed in him, the way his expression changed from assessed threat to something she'd never seen on a patient's face before. Like something had been handed to him that he didn't know he'd been waiting to receive. He crossed the corridor, sat beside her on the floor, which was not something she'd expected a man like him to do. I looked at her arm.
Show me, he said.
I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's a graze. I've seen worse in a single shift. I believe you. His voice was different now. The control was still there, but the flatness was gone. Show me anyway. She showed him. He examined her arm with a focused attention that was somehow both clinical and personal, like she mattered specifically and entirely. Looked up. You stepped in front of a child, he said. He was in the way. He was in the way, and you put yourself between him and 2 armed men without a second's hesitation. His dark eyes held hers.
Why?
Jennifer looked at the boy, who had calmed enough to press his face into her good shoulder. Because he was scared. And I was already there. Leonardo was quiet for a moment. Then, very quietly, in a tone she'd never heard from a patient, Are you scared? I'll be scared later. Right now I have to make sure he's okay, and my arm is cleaned up, and someone calls security about those 2 men and checks the rest of the floor. She started to push herself up. His hand covered hers against the wall. Not restraining, just present. Give yourself 60 seconds, he said. You've earned 60 seconds. So she did. She sat in the hospital corridor at 2 in the morning with a grazed arm and a child asleep against her shoulder, and the most dangerous man she'd ever treated sitting beside her on the floor, and she breathed. When the 60 seconds were done, she got up and went back to work. He watched her the entire time. The next morning, Jennifer arrived for her shift to find flowers at the nursing station. Not a small bouquet. An arrangement that had required planning, sent from a florist that she'd later discovered didn't do hospital deliveries as a general rule but had been persuaded to make an exception. The card said simply, in Italian and then in English beneath it, Per il coraggio che nessuno ha visto tran me. For the courage no one saw but me. LF. Her colleague Dana held the card up with raised eyebrows. LF. Patient from last night. The one with the Dana made a vague gesture that encompassed everything about Leonardo Ferrara that couldn't be spoken directly in a hospital corridor. Yes. Jennifer. Dana set the card down. Do you know who that man is? I know he was my patient, and he needed care. He's Leonardo Ferrara. As in, the Ferrara family. As in. Dana. Jennifer kept her voice level. I don't treat people based on what I read about them. I treat them based on what I see in front of me. He was injured. I helped him. That's the job. Dana looked at the flowers. He sent you flowers the size of a small country. That's his business. But Jennifer touched one of the blooms as she walked past, and when she pulled her hand back, she told herself it was just to check if they were real. They were. 3 days later, he came back. Not as a patient. He appeared in the hospital cafeteria at noon, dressed differently than before, dark clothes that sat on his well-built frame with the ease of a man who'd never needed to try, and he sat across from Jennifer at the table where she ate her lunch alone because she preferred 20 minutes of quiet to 20 minutes of conversation. You shouldn't be here, she said without looking up from her food. You were discharged. I'm aware. Are you following up with your surgical team? I have a private physician. Good. Then you don't need this hospital. No, he agreed. I don't need the hospital. Jennifer looked up. He was watching her with that same focused quality she'd noticed in Bay 7. Like she was the only interesting thing in the room, and he decided to understand her completely. Why are you here? She asked directly. To thank you. Properly. The flowers were sufficient. They weren't, but I didn't know what else would be appropriate. He leaned forward slightly. You saved a child's life, Jennifer. And you were hurt doing it. That doesn't get acknowledged with flowers. It gets acknowledged by me going home and sleeping for 8 hours and coming back tomorrow to do it again. She held his gaze. That's the job, Mr. Ferrara. I don't need special recognition for doing it. Leonardo. He said it quietly. And I'm not offering recognition. I'm offering gratitude. There's a difference. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had entire rooms calibrating around him, who had 4 suited security personnel currently stationed at the cafeteria exits she'd already clocked, who sat across from her eating lunch in a hospital cafeteria like it was the most natural thing he'd done in years. Have you eaten? She asked. He blinked. It was barely visible, but she saw it.
No.
Then eat. She pushed her coffee toward him. They have decent soup today. The sandwiches are optimistic at best. He looked at the coffee. Then at her. Then he flagged down the cafeteria server and ordered soup, and they ate lunch together, and it was the strangest and most ordinary 40 minutes of Jennifer's recent memory. Over the following 2 weeks, Leonardo returned 4 more times. Always during her lunch break, always with the same quality of attention, always asking questions about her life with the particular focus of someone who collected information but was learning to collect it differently. Not for leverage. Just because he wanted to know. She learned things about him in pieces. That he'd grown up in Naples, moved to Chicago at 22. That he had a younger brother he spoke about with careful restraint, which she understood meant complicated. That he read constantly everything the way people read when books had once been their primary company. She told him about growing up in Milwaukee with a mother who was also a nurse and a father who taught high school history. About the year she'd spent in a clinic in rural Kenya after nursing school. About the ex-boyfriend she didn't say much about, but who had left specific marks on how she talked about trust. Leonardo listened to all of it. Never filled silences with his own story when she was still in hers. She'd never met a man who listened like that, with his whole self, like her words were landing somewhere real. You're very careful, he said one afternoon. What do you mean? With information about yourself. You share, but you're always watching to see how it lands. Testing whether it's safe. Jennifer kept her expression neutral. Most people do that. Most people don't do it as consciously as you. He wasn't accusing, just observing with that precise attention. Someone taught you to be careful. She didn't answer immediately. Outside the cafeteria windows, Chicago moved through its afternoon. Someone taught me that openness is a price, she finally said. And I paid it. Leonardo looked at her steadily. I know about prices, he said. Different currency. Same weight. She believed him. By the end of the third week, Dana had begun leaving knowing looks on Jennifer's cafeteria days, and the nursing staff had opinions she mostly managed to ignore, and Jennifer had stopped pretending she wasn't thinking about him between visits. What she was less successful at ignoring was the feeling that something large was coming. Not dangerous in the way she usually thought about danger, not the physical risk she managed every shift. Something personal, the specific danger of letting someone in. She was weighing it carefully, the way she weighed everything, when the situation changed. It came through the hospital administration. A donation. Substantial, anonymous through 6 layers of foundation paperwork, but not anonymous enough for the administrator who quietly told Jennifer the source. A donation earmarked specifically for the ER nursing department. New equipment. Adequate staffing. The mobile devices they'd been requesting for 2 years that would allow nurses to document patient care without abandoning the bedside to find a computer. Jennifer sat with this information for 1 day. Then she called the number Leonardo had given her and said, "I need to talk to you." He arrived in 20 minutes. She met him in the hospital garden, small and underused, and she stood with her arms crossed and looked at him squarely. "You donated to my department." An anonymous donor. Leonardo. She stopped him with his name, which she hadn't used before, and watched his expression change almost imperceptibly at the sound of it. "I'm not going to pretend I don't know it was you. Don't make me pretend." A beat.
No.
"It was me." "Why?" "Because your department needed it. Because watching you work in inadequate conditions with inadequate equipment and still somehow keep everyone alive is..." He stopped. Chose words more carefully. "Because I could fix one concrete thing, and I fixed it. That's not your job."
No.
"But I have resources and you have need. The math isn't complicated. It's complicated for me." Jennifer's voice stayed level. "Because now I have to decide what it means. Whether it's generosity or whether it's not a transaction." His voice was quiet and very clear. "I don't want anything from you, Jennifer. Not from this. The donation has nothing to do with us." "Is there an US?" The question landed between them like something that had needed saying for 3 weeks. Leonardo looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know yet, but I'd like there to be." He put his hands in his pockets. "I've been coming to this hospital for 3 weeks. I've rearranged my schedule 4 times. I've told my security team more about hospital cafeteria soup than they ever wanted to know." His jaw worked slightly. "You are the most direct, most honest, most completely unsettled me person I've encountered in my adult life. And I am not good at this. I don't have practice at it. But I'm here, and I keep coming back, and if that means something to you the way I think it might, I'd like to know." Jennifer uncrossed her arms, looked at the small hospital garden, back at him. "It means something," she said. "I'm scared of what it means. But it means something." His exhale was barely audible, but she heard it. "Then can we have dinner?" he asked. "Not here. Somewhere you choose. Somewhere that has nothing to do with any of this." She chose a Caribbean restaurant in Wicker Park that she'd been going to since nursing school, where the owner knew her name, and the jerk chicken was the closest thing to her mother's cooking she'd found in Chicago. Leonardo ate everything with a focused appreciation of a man who'd spent too many years eating whatever was available rather than what he wanted. He asked about her mother. She asked about Naples. They talked until the restaurant was closing, and when they walked out into the cool evening, he hailed a cab for her and held the door and said her name once, quietly, before she got in. "Jennifer." She turned. "Thank you for choosing somewhere real," he said. "People usually try to impress me. It gets exhausting."
She got in the cab,
smiled at the window as it pulled away, felt the smile stay on her face for the entire ride home, which she documented internally as significant and then set aside to examine later. Later never came, because the following week brought complications. His name first. A colleague showed her a news article, investigative journalism, the kind that named names and drew organizational charts, and asked the questions that powerful men preferred unanswered. Leonardo Ferrara. The Ferrara Operation. Numbers and networks, and implications that sprawled across 3 pages of carefully documented detail. Jennifer read it once, then put her phone down and went back to work and didn't look at it again until her shift was over. Then she called him. "I read the article," she said when he answered. Silence on the line. Then, "I see. I'm not calling to run. I'm calling because I want to hear your side of it. Not a justification. Your truth." Another pause. Longer. "Are you sure?" "I'm a nurse, Leonardo. I've sat with people while they died. I've held the hands of people who did terrible things and people who had terrible things done to them, and sometimes they're the same person. I'm not afraid of complicated truth. I'm afraid of being lied to. Then meet me tonight. Let me tell you properly."
She did.
They sat in his apartment, which was on the 42nd floor and had the skyline as a backdrop and books on every wall that told her something important about him that the news article hadn't. And he told her. Not everything. She understood there were things she wouldn't be told. But what he gave her was honest, the real shape of it, where he'd come from and what he'd built and what he was trying, genuinely and with real cost, to change. He told her about the operations he'd closed in the past 3 years. The alliances he'd refused to renew. The younger men in his organization who were studying, legitimately, in programs he funded. The long and nonlinear process of trying to transition something built on decades of a different code. "I'm not going to tell you, I'm a good man," he said. "I've done things I can't undo. But I'm trying to build something different. And I'm more serious about it than I was before." He looked at her. "Before you." Jennifer sat with that. Outside, Chicago glittered 42 floors below. "I need time to process this," she said finally. "Take it. And I need you to understand that I won't be managed or protected from information. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I need to be treated as an equal participant, not someone to be shielded." "That's what I want," he said quietly. "More than you know. Someone who doesn't pretend. Someone I don't have to perform for." She went home that night and lay in bed and had an honest conversation with herself about risk and want and the particular wisdom of falling for someone who occupied the world Leonardo Ferrara occupied. She went back and forth for 3 hours. And then she thought about the way he sat on the hospital floor beside her. The 60 seconds he'd given her. The soup in the cafeteria. The way he listened like her words were landing somewhere real. She thought about what it felt like to be genuinely seen after a year of feeling invisible. She called him in the morning. "I'm in," she said. "But my terms stand." "Your terms stand," he said. The months that followed were the most complicated and unexpectedly wonderful of Jennifer's adult life. Leonardo learned her schedule and worked around it rather than expecting her to work around his, which she later discovered was not his natural mode of operation and represented significant personal development. He showed up at the hospital at the end of brutal shifts with food from the Caribbean restaurant in Wicker Park, sitting in the parking garage with his security team and containers of jerk chicken because she hadn't eaten and he'd noticed. He came to her apartment and cooked, which she hadn't expected, an Italian man who cooked with the efficiency of someone who'd learned because no one else was going to. They ate at her kitchen table and talked about everything. He read the books she recommended. She listened to his thoughts about the city, about power, about what he was trying to build. She met his younger brother, Marco, who was 24 and studying urban planning, and spoke to Jennifer with the wary respect of someone who'd never seen his brother choose a person before and wasn't entirely sure what it meant. "He's different when you're around," Marco said once, when Leonardo was in another room. "Less like he's running calculations constantly." "Maybe he is," Jennifer said. "Just different calculations." Marco looked at her with something that was almost approval. Maybe. But the world Leonardo operated in didn't stay outside the relationship. It couldn't. It wasn't designed to. The first warning came from within his own circle. A man named Cavallo, older, who had been in the Ferrara operation since before Leonardo took over, who had watched the gradual changes with the specific resentment of someone whose position depended on things staying the same. Cavallo didn't threaten Jennifer directly. He was too careful for that. But there were conversations she wasn't supposed to overhear and did, and there were looks that followed her when she visited Leonardo's office building, and there was a creeping awareness that not everyone in his world was celebrating her presence. She told Leonardo. He listened. His expression went through the controlled stages she'd learned to read, from receiving to processing to the cold place where decisions were made. "I'll handle it," he said. "I know. I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you because you said no information management." He looked at her. "You're right. Thank you for telling me. How worried should I be? On a scale?" "Honest scale." "Moderate," he said. Cavallo prefers influence to action. He'll push back through channels before he'd consider anything direct. But I'm watching him." He paused. "And I'm adding security for you. Non-negotiable. Before you object, I know it's your life and your choice, and I'm telling you plainly that this is one place I need you to let me protect you without arguing." Jennifer looked at him, thought about the article, about the organizational chart, about the things she'd chosen to understand when she'd said she was in.
"Fine," she said.
"But I want to meet them. Know their names. I'm not having anonymous men following me." "Absolutely." He let out a quiet breath. "Thank you."
It happened anyway.
Not through Cavallo. Through someone who saw Jennifer not as a target but as currency. She'd been on a double shift. It was a Thursday, raining, and she walked out of the hospital into the parking garage at 11:15 with her bag over her shoulder and her mind already calculating how many hours she had before her next shift. They took her in the stairwell. Two men she'd never seen. Professional, prepared, with a specific script delivered in flat, rehearsed tones. They weren't there to hurt her. They wanted a message delivered to Leonardo Ferrara. The message was territorial. Business. The kind of language that treated human beings as punctuation marks in a negotiation. Jennifer listened to the entire message, which took approximately 90 seconds. Then she said, very clearly, "I'm going to need you to let go of my arm. And then I'm going to make a phone call. And then you're going to need to leave this garage before the people on the other end of that call arrive." The men looked at each other. "Now," she said, with the specific authority of someone who had told very large, scared men to stay still while she restarted their hearts. "Let go of my arm." They did. She called Leonardo. She told him the garage, the stairwell level, what the men had said verbatim because she had a clinical memory for exact language. She described both men's physical appearance while they stared at her. Leonardo's voice on the line was the calmest she'd ever heard it, which she now knew meant the opposite of calm. "Don't hang up," he said. "Are you hurt?"
"No."
They were messengers. The message was about the Bellucci territory dispute. A beat of silence. "You retain this specific territorial reference from a message delivered under duress." "I'm a nurse. I retain information under duress." "Jennifer." His voice dropped. "Are you actually okay?" "I'm angry. I'll be scared later." That's a sound that was almost a laugh, low and tight. "I'm coming. Don't move." He arrived in 11 minutes. She was still in the stairwell when he came through the door, and the first thing he did was look at her with absolute focused intensity and say, "Show me your arms," in a voice that didn't leave room for argument, and she showed him, and he examined both arms carefully, and when he'd satisfied himself that she was physically unhurt, he did something she hadn't expected. He pulled her into his arms and held her. Not briefly. For a long time. His heart was going at a pace that told her everything his voice was controlling. She put her hands against his chest and felt him breathe, slowly and deliberately, and she breathed with him because it was the right thing to do. "I am going to end the Bellucci situation," he said against her hair. "Completely and permanently." "I know," she said. "But first you're going to take me somewhere I can eat something because I haven't had dinner and I am significantly more scared now that I'm allowed to be, and I need food before I can be scared properly." He pulled back and looked at her. The thing in his face was so enormous and unguarded that she almost looked away. "Anywhere you want," he said. "The Caribbean place. It's closed on Thursdays." She sagged slightly. He caught it. "I'll cook," he said. "Come home with me. Let me feed you, and let you be scared somewhere safe." She went, sitting in his kitchen at midnight while he moved efficiently through the process of making her something real to eat. Jennifer finally let the fear arrive. Not dramatically. Just the quiet shaking that started in her hands and moved through her until he noticed and turned from the stove and came to where she was sitting and crouched in front of her. "There it is," he said gently. There it is, she agreed.
He took her hands.
Held them until the shaking eased. Looked up at her with those dark eyes that were never flat with her now, never performing. I need you to know something, he said. Whatever the Bellucci situation costs me, whatever I have to give up or sacrifice to ensure you're never in a stairwell like that again, I'll do it. Without question. I don't want you to lose things because of me. You're not why I'd lose them. The life I've been running is why. You're just the reason I'm finally willing to change it fast enough to matter. His hands tightened around hers. I love you, Jennifer. I've been trying to find the right moment to say it, but there isn't one because there's no moment that fully contains it. I love you, and I need you to be safe. And those two things are now the most important facts of my life. The air in the kitchen changed. She looked at the man crouching in front of her. The man who had sat on a hospital floor and given her 60 seconds. Who had learned her lunch schedule and brought her food and read her recommended books and learned her coffee order and shown her his brother and told her the real shape of his life even when it cost him. Who was currently holding her hand steady in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and rosemary at midnight. I love you too, she said. I've been trying not to for 2 months, and I'm not going to manage it. He stood, pulled her up with him, and kissed her with the particular restraint of someone who has enormous feeling and is being careful with it. It was warm and certain and said everything neither of them had words for yet. Later, in the quiet of his apartment, the city below and his steady breathing beside her, Jennifer felt herself fall into the deepest sleep she'd had in months. She woke at 5. The old fear came with the early light. The specific terror of having given herself entirely to someone and not knowing what came next. He was sleeping and she lay there and watched him and thought about stairwells and organizations and the things you accepted when you loved someone who carried weight like his. And then she thought about the garlic and rosemary, about the books, about 11 minutes in a parking garage, about 60 seconds in a hospital corridor. She stayed. He woke at 5:30 and found her sitting at his window with his coffee in her hands and asked if she was okay, and she said, I'm trying to figure out if I'm brave enough for this. He sat beside her. What would brave enough look like? Staying when it's complicated. Being honest even when it costs me. Not running every time I get scared. She looked at her coffee. Trusting that you mean what you say. Do you? He asked. Trust that I mean what I say? She thought about it honestly.
Yes.
That's the terrifying part. I actually do. Then that's brave enough, he said. That's all it is. The Bellucci situation resolved over the following month in ways Jennifer was told the broad strokes of, and not the specific details of, which was a negotiated boundary she'd accepted. What she understood was that it required Leonardo to give up territory and influence he'd been holding for years, and that he did it without apparent regret, and that when she asked if he was okay with what it cost, he said, I've been holding things for the wrong reasons for a long time. Letting them go is overdue. Cavallo left the organization. Leonardo said simply that it had been made clear the direction had changed. Jennifer didn't ask more. What remained was quieter, more real. Leonardo's world reorganized itself incrementally towards something that looked less like what it had been and more like what he'd been saying he wanted to build. It wasn't clean or fast. These things never were. But it was genuine. He came to the hospital 6 months after the stairwell incident on a Wednesday, Jennifer's short shift day, and was waiting in the parking garage when she came out. He'd been there, she would later learn, for 45 minutes before her shift ended. She saw him from 20 meters away, standing beside his car in the late afternoon light, and something in his posture told her before she reached him. What is it? She asked. He turned. In his hand was a small box, and his expression had the particular quality of a man who had survived 38 years of a difficult world and was now more frightened than he'd ever been by something good. I practiced this, he said. I had a speech. It was reasonably good.
He stopped.
And now you're in front of me, and I can't remember it. Jennifer looked at the box. At him. At the way he was holding himself. The costly exposure of it. You don't need the speech, she said. I need to tell you what you are to me, he said. Because it's too important to abbreviate. You changed the way I understand my own life. The night you sat in that corridor and said it hurt too much, You said what I'd been unable to say for 20 years. About all of it. About living in a way that's wrong, and not having the language for wrong. And then you got up and went back to work, and I thought that is what a person who lives correctly looks like. And I needed to be near it.
He stopped.
Near you. Always near you. I want to build everything around that. Will you marry me? Jennifer looked at him for a long time. You cried, she said. He blinked. I did not cry. Your eyes are wet, Leonardo. He looked away briefly. When he looked back, his jaw was set with dignity she found deeply charming. That's irrelevant to the question. Yes, she said. Yes to the question. Obviously yes. He opened the box. The ring was exactly her, which meant he'd paid a specific kind of attention that she registered and filed as significant. He slid it on with hands that were steady now, the steadiness that was his natural mode, and then looked at her with the open face she'd worked to earn for months. They were married 4 months later in a ceremony that was small by any standard and enormous by the standard of men like Leonardo, who had never imagined himself doing this with real feeling. Jennifer's mother flew from Milwaukee and took one look at Leonardo and told Jennifer privately that she'd done something right. Leonardo's brother Marco gave a toast that was both terrible and perfect and made Jennifer laugh until her eyes watered. The following spring, Jennifer put Leonardo's hand on her stomach on an early Sunday morning and let him feel what she'd been carrying for 3 weeks. He went completely still. The controlled stillness she'd once read as flat and now understood as the way he processed things that mattered completely. Are you? He started. Yes. He sat down on the bed, looked at his own hand, looked at her. Tell me something, she said. What are you feeling right now? Actual feeling. No performance. He thought about it for a real moment. Like the thing I thought I was building toward was actually just the beginning of something I can't see the shape of yet. He looked up. Like I'm scared in the best possible way. That, she said, sitting beside him, taking his hand. That's the right answer. She had learned over the years since a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning that the right answer was never the certain one. It was the honest one, the frightened one, the one spoken by a person who was trying. She had also learned that when a man hears something true in 3 words and then spends the next year proving he deserved to hear them, that's what love looked like when it was built correctly. Out of wreckage. Out of honesty. Out of 60 seconds given to a woman bleeding in a corridor who hadn't known yet that she'd been waiting to be found. It hurts too much, she'd said. Not anymore. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to the Mafia Codes and drop a comment below telling me which moment broke you open, because your comments, your likes, your subscriptions are what bring these stories to the people who need them most. Until next time, besties. Remember, sometimes the truest things we say are the ones we don't mean to say out loud. And sometimes the right person is listening.